Good evening, everyone. Welcome, and thank you for joining us for this evening's National Arts Club program at home. My name is Chin Dao, co-chair of the Architecture Committee. For those of you who are not familiar with the National Arts Club, we are a 501c3 nonprofit with a mission to stimulate, foster, and promote public interest in the arts. Annually, the club offers more than 150 free programs to the public, including exhibitions, theatrical and musical performances, lectures, and readings. For more information about the National Arts Club, you can visit us at nationalartsclub.org or find us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Just a invitation before we start. We have next April 14th in the Grand Gallery at Gramercy Park, James Sanders, The Constant Future, a Century of the Regional Plan of New York City. On behalf of the President, the Board of Governors, and the Architecture Committee, it is my pleasure to welcome you to today's event by Robert King, Women Architects of the 19th Century. And to give you a little information about Robert, Robert Arthur King, FAIA, focuses on achievements of these architects who were born in the 19th century. King, a fellow with the American Institute of Architects, has taught at the New York School of Interior Design since 1988. He is a graduate of the Columbia University and the Architectural Association Graduate School in London. And without further ado, Robert Arthur King. Thank you, Robert.
Second, let me just share my screen. Slideshow. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
And I forgot to share. This lecture is about architects who are women and born in the 19th century. As one of the minority groups subjected to discrimination, the odds of success were against them. Remarkably, many became successful despite the difficulties they faced within American society. These women architects designed projects both nationally and internationally. I chose to focus on these architects and their contribution and achievements in the architectural profession. While doing the research for this lecture, I discovered a number of American women in many fields besides architecture who achieved success and have been recognized as outstanding. It has been very gratifying. To the Senate and House of Representatives in 1848, the undersigned women of the United States respectfully ask an amendment to the Constitution shall prohibit the several states from disenfranchising any of the citizens on the grounds of sex. These four historic women who had an impact on the profession as architects and as women. Elizabeth Austin. She was an American photographer who worked in Staten Island and one of the first American female.
Arthur.
Yes.
Robert, would you mind speaking up or putting the microphone a little bit closer to you, perhaps?
Not a problem. Is this better?
Oh, that's so much better. That's so much better. Thank you.
Elizabeth Austin was one of the first American female photographers to work outside of a studio. Bernice Abbott, she was an American photographer, besides known for her photographs of 20th century culture figures between the wars. Louise Blanchard, she had an apprenticeship in a firm in upstate in Buffalo, and she opened an independent office in the 1880s. She was elected to the Western Association of Architects first female associate of the American Institute of Architects in 1888, and in 1889 she became the first female fellow, besides being known and a masterpiece in the New Historic Hotel Lafayette. This is her firm in 1891. This is the Lafayette Hotel in Buffalo, done in 1898 to 1904, and it was designed for the Pan American Exhibition of 1902, 225 rooms. The interesting, well, let's have a photograph of the interior, how it looked then, and how it looks now. She did many school buildings. This is one school, the Central High School in Buffalo. She did also 20 schools in the city of Buffalo, over 10 police stations, a women's prison, the Erie County Penitentiary, and the 24th Regiment Armory. The interesting thing that I found in the AIA Guide to Buffalo, they only talk about 2 buildings that she did. This is another school building done in 1890. Another school building that she did. And another one in 1886. One can see H.H. Richardson's influence with the eyelash window and the entry door. This is the plan of the school. And she also did Lafayette Square in Buffalo. Regarding the fair of 1893, she wrote that basically the male architects were paid $10,000 and they were selected. The women had to compete and were paid $1,000. And she felt this discrepancy would last for generations. Dorothy Draper. She was an American interior decorator, stylistically very anti-minimalist, using bright colors. Edna Millay, she was an American lyrical poet and playwright. In 1923, she became the first woman to win a Pulitzer Prize in poetry. Sophia Hayden. She was a graduate of MIT in 1890, and she designed the Women's Pavilion in the Fair of 1893. This is her class. This is her right here. And in here, I also noticed Robert Robinson Taylor, who was one of the first Black architects in the United States. This is her sorority. This is her thesis project, which is a Renaissance Museum of Fine Arts, done in 92. And another plan of her thesis project. She won the competition to do the fair. And this was her first project. She had just graduated and she won the competition. These are the men who all got paid $10,000 and were appointed to design buildings at the fair. This is a photograph of the fair, and one can see the Ferris wheel by George Washington Ferris, which was the most successful aspect of the fair. This is a plan of the fair, and the Women's Pavilion is right here. Another photograph of the fair. This is a rendering of the women's building. Floor plan of the women's building, which I guess for me, it had very good egress and bathroom facilities. This is it during construction. While this building was being constructed, she had very little help from the male architects and the contractors, and she suffered a breakdown while the building was being constructed. A photograph of the building. The photograph. The entryway of the building. The finished interior. This was known as the New York Room in the fair. The loggia. She's after this building was completed, she never worked in architecture again. She's from Chile and she taught in Boston, but never practiced architecture again because of the experience she had. Emma Stubbins. She was an American sculptor and the first woman to receive a public commission from New York City. She is best known for her work, The Angel of the Waters at Bethesda Fountain. Ethel Waters, she was an American singer and actress and was the second African-American to be nominated for an Academy Award. Marion Lucy Mahoney Griffin. She graduated from MIT, and her cousin, Dwight Perkins of Perkins and Wills, got her the job to work for Frank Lloyd Wright. This is her class. Here she is in the center. This was her thesis project, which is a home and studio for a painter. This is her after graduation, and she was the first person to work for Frank Lloyd Wright and the first licensed architect in the state of Illinois in 1895. This is one of her renderings that she did for Frank Lloyd Wright. Because Wright did not allow anyone's name on any drawing, she would open a window on all of her renderings to show her way of saying this was hers. The Winslow House of 94, and this is done after the building was built. And these are some other renderings of hers, and you can see in many cases there's a window open. Dana House, and again, a window open. But so that was her trademark. And then basically during that time, during the Prairie School, she was not really considered a member, but other architects would copy her renderings and they were called Marionesque drawings. Here she has the window open. She also did the interiors for Frank Lloyd Wright. But her renderings is how I attribute a lot of Frank Lloyd Wright's fame. Henderson House. Not going fast enough. Willits. The Ladies' Home Journal building that Frank Lloyd Wright proposed. And this was a low-cost suburban house. I think it was $5,000. But again, as you can see, the window is open. Her style of renderings, I thought, were quite unique for its time, because prior to this, no one had done anything like that. And how she also changed the border as part of the trees. The Hurley House, the Hillside School, Darwin House, Unity Temple, obviously no windows there. The Millard House, the Coonley House, and the interior of the Coonley House. Basically, there's no record of her doing the interiors. The only person's name on any of Frank Lloyd Wright's drawings was Frank Lloyd Wright. Frederick Roby House. This is a church she did on her own in Evanston, Illinois in 1901. And another of her old Church of the All Souls. And an interior. On the left here is Mahoney with Kathleen Wright, Frank Lloyd Wright's first wife. And on the right is Mary Lucy Mahoney with her husband, Walter Burley Griffin. And this is when they started working together. And she would put MMG on her drawings. The window thing was not necessary any longer. They entered a competition, which was an international competition to do the city of Canberra in Australia. There were several hundred people competing. They won the competition. It's my not only myself, many others feel that it was her design, not her husband. Not that her husband didn't contribute to it. And this has been when asked about whose design was it, she gave an answer which I think only a woman would do. Her answer was, my husband's name is on the drawing. And this is some of the plans. There were 14 drawings done by her. And while in Australia, they did many projects. This is the Newman College and Garden in Melbourne. Another rendering of that. This is her class reunion in 1939, 1894 class. Walter Burley Griffin died in India, and so she was alone. She came back to the United States and never worked again. While when they discuss prairie architects, eventually, or less recently, her name really is mentioned. Harriet Beecher Stowe. She was an American author and abolitionist, and she became known for her novel Uncle Tom's Cabin in 1852. Ida Bell Wells. She was an American investigative journalist, educator, and early leader in the civil rights movement, and she was also one of the founders of the NAACP. Julia Morgan went to the University of California and studied civil engineering in 1894 and graduated from the École des Beaux-Arts in Paris in 1901, and she was the first woman to graduate from that school. This is her at 6 years old in Brooklyn Heights. This is her sorority, and here she is in the corner here. Well, because of studying structural engineering, which was very rare for a woman, made her very valuable in Chicago, especially after the earthquake. And this is her in her studio in Paris. Her thesis project, which is the theater. And she was 27 years old, which is the limit for a graduate in the École des Beaux-Arts. Another rendering of a staircase. She met Mrs. Hertz, Hertz's mother, and she helped sponsor Julia Morgan in getting projects. And this is what's called a ferry house of 1899. This is what before she graduated. Another fair house, and she befriended Bernard Maybeck, and he assisted her in several of the projects. And this is one of the first reinforced concrete structures in the United States, which she designed when she worked for the University of California. And because of the success of this theater, she was terminated. This is the Fairmont Hotel in San Francisco. So after the earthquake, she was the one to redesign structurally to support this building. And then the rendering of the hotel. Some of her projects, the King's Daughter's Home in 1908. Plan. Interior of the exterior of a church. Not the interior. This is the interior. Many of her designs, one of the things that clients liked about her, very similar to Eero Saarinen, is none of her, she did not have a particular style. She was really liked because she catered to her clients' needs. And this building is more arts and crafts. Piedmont building, the Lombard, the Presbyterian Church, Lombard House, the Presbyterian Church. Another view of that. The interior of the church. And, well, anyway. The Gill House in 1916. The YWCA, but she did many YWCAs in California, in the West, and also in Hawaii. And she also did the entry to the YWCA in the Pan American International Exhibit in 1914. Another one of her projects. Rosenberg House. Goodrich House. Heritage. This is the Mingquan Chinese Girls School, and its name has been changed to the Julia Morgan School. House in Santa Barbara. A house. Another one of the houses on the estate for Hertz and Marion Davies. This was done in 33. The Cinderella House. River House done on Hertz's estate. Another hall. A women's club, California. Another William Club in Berkeley. The interior. This was her office. And here she is. She's a very small woman, but that's her. These are the people who worked for her. In 1926, she met William Randolph Hearst, and she worked from him from 26 until 1945. She's best known for doing Hertz's castle and his estate, but what's failed to be mentioned, she has done 700 other buildings out west. And that's usually not discussed, unfortunately. This is the site plan. Another site plan. This is the model of the castle. And here it is in 26. The dining room, nice and cozy. One of the guest houses, the duplex. The study gallery. Now, again, if you consider her other work that she did, and this is quite extreme. It doesn't, one would not say she doesn't, this isn't her style, but she catered to her clients. The billiard room. The assembly room. The library. And there was a menagerie on the site. That's her feeding an elephant. And this is Neptune Pool. I've not been to San Simeon, so I'm not that familiar with. I know this is rather well known. And this is on the left is the Hearst Building in San Francisco, and the YWCA in 1926 in Hawaii. She received the gold medal from the American Institute of Architects in 2014, 57 years after her death. And it's only recently that I feel that she's been recognized as a major force in the profession of architecture. These four women these four women, I feel I focused on because I feel they were, beside being getting more information on them, I feel they were a tremendous force in the profession of architecture, and at many degree have been ignored. Lillian Russell, she was an American actress and singer. She became one of the most famous actresses and singers in the late 19th and earliest 20th century. Sue T. Wan was an American actress, and she became known for starring in The Birth of a Nation and Intolerance in 1915 and 1916. Eleanor Raymond, who went to Wesley College and the Cambridge School of Architecture and Landscape Architecture for Women in 1919. And she was one of the first women to do an international building in 1931 in the United States. Ethel Furman, she was one of the few Black women I found, and she did over 200 churches and residential buildings and 2 churches in Liberia. Henrietta Dozier went to the MIT, graduated in 1899 with a bachelor's, and was the 3rd woman to graduate in a class of 176. Ida Ryan went to MIT, and she was refused membership into the American Institute of Architects because she was a woman, but eventually she was stated to become a AIA member in 1921. Isabel Roberts, who worked for Frank Lloyd Wright for years, also was rejected from becoming an American Institute of Architects member. Josephine Chapman also refused membership into the American Institute of Architects. Madame Curie, she was a Polish and naturalized French physicist and chemist, and she was the first woman to win a Nobel Prize, and the first person and the only woman to win a Nobel Prize twice, and the person to win Nobel Prize in 2 scientific fields. Gage, she was an American woman suffragette, Native American rights activist, abolitionist, free thinker, and author. She was the author of Women as Inventor and Women's Rights in 1868. Lillian Rice, she went to the University of California in 1910, received a bachelor's degree. She became a member of the Institute of Architects in 1931 and registered in 1927 and started her own firm in 1928. Louise Howe, she studied at the Museum of Fine Arts in 1868 in Massachusetts, also went to MIT in 1890. She was the 2nd place woman in the Women's Pavilion in the Fair of 1893, and the first woman fellow in the AIA in 1931. Riggs went to the University of California, got a Bachelor of Arts degree in 1919 and graduated in 1920, licensed in 1928, and was named Woman of the Year in 1931. Marion Manley, University of Illinois in 1917. She became the 2nd female architect in the state of Florida in 1918 and designed the University of Miami campus. And she received a gold medal award in 1973 from the Florida Association of American Institute of Architects. Hazel Waterman, University of California. She was the early 20th century American architect working in the arts and crafts style in California. Sojourner Truth. She was an American abolitionist and women's rights activist. After going to court to recover her son in 1828, she became the first Black woman to win such a case against a white man. Susan B. Anthony. She was an American social reformer and women's rights activist, and she played a pivotal role in the women's suffragette movement. Elizabeth Colt, California School of Design in 1891, and she worked for Fred Harvey Company, which did a lot of hotels and places in the Midwest. Rydell, her school, unknown. She was the first woman licensed in New York State and the state of Connecticut. Became an American Institute of Architect member in 1918, and 1926 she became a fellow of the American Institute of Architects. She also redesigned Theodore Roosevelt's house in Manhattan, and she survived the Lusitania. Coulter, school, unknown. She was an American architect, and her career was devoted to housing in the public sector. Elsie Wagner, she's the first, was a female architect. First commission was the Women's Building and the Cotton State and International Exhibition in 1894. In addition to these American women, I came across Elaine Gray. She was an Irish woman who worked in France and did many, specialty was lacquer furniture, and she did many pieces of furniture and several exhibitions in her time. And she also did a house for her and her roommate in southern France. Agnes Ballard. She was an American architect and educator, and the first female registered architect in Florida, and the sixth woman admitted to the American Institute of Architects. Else Mercer was a Pittsburgh, as a Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania first woman architect, trained in architecture and the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts, and worked on the women's exhibition for the Cotton State International Exhibition in Atlanta in 1894. Beatrice Farrard, she was an American landscape gardener and landscape architect, and she did over 110 gardens. Lee, she was an American architect, the fourth woman registered architect in Georgia, and one of Georgia's and the South's most prominent female architects. And Lipscomb, she was an American architect and woman suffragette in Massachusetts. She was one of the first 10 women graduates from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Mercer Mead was an American architect known for taking a neighborhood center approach to design and low-cost housing. Margaret Spencer, she was an American architect and painter who designed and built architecturally unique dude ranches in Arizona. Mary Hook, she was an American architect and a pioneer for women in architecture. She worked principally from Kansas, Missouri. Nellie Allen, she was an American landscape architect and was known for her knot gardens. She designed Pierre Gardens in the 1939 World's Fair in New York. Harriet Irwin, she was an American architect and the first woman to patent an architectural design that she submitted. Fannie Barry Wells was was an African-American educator, civil rights and women's rights activist, and she was the first Black woman to gain membership into the Chicago Women's Club. And Elizabeth Cady Stratton, she was an American writer and activist who was the leader in the women's rights movement in the United States, the main force behind the 1848 Seneca Falls Convention and the author of the Declaration of Sentiments, which actually was rewording of the Declaration of Independence. Well, my focus was mainly on these 4 women architects. As you can see, there are many other women I have indicated, and there are many more that are unknown and that have contributed to the architectural and design profession in the 20th and the 21st century. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Robert. I wanted to begin the Q&A portion and just ask you the questions directly from our audience. And also, I wanted to re-thank everybody who could attend tonight. I think we've learned a lot. All right, so let's get to the questions. Oh, well, first is a statement from Laura about Unity Temple. The windows are all at the front at the Unity Temple, but not at the refectory level. This is to separate the ordinary of the street from the spiritual of the temple. The street is not visible from the temple. So I think like the focus is sort of upward to the heavens. The next question is from Jussie. What do all these other women mentioned have to do with architecture? The other. Oh, you're muted, Robert. I can't hear you. Nadine, can Robert be heard? I don't hear him.
Yeah, Robert, we can't hear you. Maybe mute and unmute yourself. Let's try that. Oh, no, still nothing. Sorry, everyone.
There, back on.
There
Okay.
you go.
Okay, I hit the button by accident. Okay. The other women architects and designers, which I feel have not been really publicized very much, is why I mentioned them. The other women that I mentioned, who are like Madame Curie and people of that nature, I felt were women born in the 1800s, but also contributed and should be recognized, is why I mentioned them as well.
Great, thank you. Marie says, well, first she wants to state that she is lives in the West, and she doesn't like to hear it called out West because it just is. More than we are back East. But she would love to hear some more details about Julia Morgan, who was fired because her designs were too popular.
Well, what she did, she showed up her boss, and that's why she was terminated. Because that reinforced concrete amphitheater had never been done before. And so when she designed it, and it was a reinforced concrete, everybody marveled over it, and she overshadowed the male architect.
Amazing. Yeah, and I heard that her buildings all withstood the architect. I mean, sorry, the earthquakes and fires. I'm a Berkeley man myself from the West at some point. So
But he was a structural engineer.
Right.
So that's why her buildings withstood the test of time and the earthquake.
Great. What were the major factors that spurred the recent recognition of these women architects?
I guess time and the women's movement. I'd say from the 70s, that's when they started. Because when I went to school, the women weren't even mentioned and at all. And Julia Morgan was just shown that they're doing Sensibian, nothing else. But the women's movement, I think, of the 70s really got things going, and to recognize women architects and in other professions and their contribution.
Yeah, that makes sense. Anonymous attendee asks if your women's info is written up anywhere, like a book or a scholarly journal. They'd love to read more of the many women mentioned.
No, it's not. I mean, my sources are numerous books that I've gone through and researched. That's the only way I found it. There's no one single book, unfortunately, on women's contributions, especially in the architectural profession.
I think she's asking that you could perhaps maybe write a book.
Well,
Uh,
if I did, I'd have to have a woman with me doing it.
Yeah, that's a good idea. That's a great idea. Renee asked, where did Elise Merkur Wagner practice primarily? Was anything she has designed actually built?
The only building I know she did was the one in Paris. I mean, out in southern France. Most of her designs were furniture, lack of furniture. Elsie Gray, right? She's talking about?
No, Elsie Wagner. Oh, sorry, Elise Wagner. Elise Merkur Wagner.
I can't. I don't have all of it memorized. Maybe I should. Yeah. All I have on her, which is because I gave this lecture before, so she's an addition, that she did the women's building for the Cotton State and International Exhibition in 1894. This first architect in Pittsburgh, went to Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts. That's really the only information. Born in 1964 and died in 1947. But that's the only information I have on her.
Yeah,
Many of these women, by the way, it was very difficult obtaining information. I mean, and some of it conflicting, but it's very, I stumble across them. Is how I found many of them.
Got you. All right. Sarah asked, which of these buildings survive today?
That I don't know. Of which architect. I think many of Julia Morgan's buildings, Marion Mahoney's buildings that she did with Frank Lloyd Wright. I think also in Buffalo, but even though the AIA Guide to Buffalo doesn't talk about many of her buildings, but I need to, I guess, go to Buffalo one day to see what buildings are standing.
Sounds good. Did any women work on Falling Water? Do you know if Marion Mahoney worked on Falling Water?
When Frank Lloyd Wright ran away with Mrs. Chenet in 1909 and sold the firm to Van Holtz and not to her, she left the firm. And that was the end of her relationship with Frank Lloyd Wright.
Got you. And do you know if that was prior to or after Falling Water?
That was 1909. Falling Water was 33, 34.
Oh, okay, great. Would you perhaps share some of the titles of some of the books or sites where you found some of this fascinating information? This question is from Cheryl.
A lot of it on the internet. And I have a collection of books in my office, in my home, on architecture. I have quite a number of books that I've researched. And that's how I got most of it. And every now and then on the internet, I discover another name.
And are the books on women architect, are they on particular, like one book per architect per se, or is there a reference for?
Many of the books are male architects, and they slip in some women.
Sure.
Every now and then I discover a woman.
Yeah, you. All right. Sydney asked, in your opinion, what are the similarities between African American and women architects and the obstacles they endured?
I think with minority women, there's a thicker glass ceiling.
I think the question is, what are the similarities between women and minority architects, or African American and and
Well,
women.
for African American architects and women, I think it's the glass ceiling. It's the dream of doing something, and the odds are somewhat against you. Sometimes you have to learn twice as much just to be equal to a white male. And it's unfortunate, but sometimes that's the way it is.
Yeah, you know. Another attendee asked that you write a book.
Pardon me?
Another attendee asks that you write a book, please.
Well, if time permits, and if there's another pandemic, then I'd have more time. Yes.
Sounds good. Sarah also asked, did Frank Lloyd Wright give credit to the women who worked with him?
No,
Not you.
no. Their names, their names do not appear in any drawing at all.
Got you. Kathleen points out that Anna Wagner Ketchline was the first woman registered architect in Pennsylvania, and she was a secret agent in World War I.
Ah,
Something for you to include, maybe.
that's Wagner?
Anna Wagner Ketchline, Keichlline.
Huh.
All right, and here's some good information from Cynthia. She says, for further info on women architects, see books The First American Women Architects by Sarah Alabak and Early Women Architects of the San Francisco Bay Area by Igna Schaefer Horton.
I may have those books in my library.
Got you. Sounds good. And some more information coming in. Steve Tepperman says there's a great new book about Julia Morgan.
Yes, I know. I have it.
Oh, good. Great. And I'll tell you, there's a really good women architects and designers podcast called New Angle Podcast. There's really only 6 episodes, but the Julia Morgan one is excellent, and there's some other really good ones. They're produced very well with a lot of interviews with people who knew them, and in-depth look at them. Most of them are about an hour long. So
Julia Morgan's drawings and documents, I think, are in the University of California.
that makes sense. And a lot of her buildings still exist. They're built to last, right?
Yes. Well,
Nancy says there's a book on Luta Maria Rigg and a movie about her.
did not know that.
And Cynthia actually also says that Luta Maria Riggs is her name, not Rigg.
Oh.
And Mary Jane Coulter, not Colt. All right, and one more thing. Kathleen says about Anna Wagner Ketchline that she designed a movie house in Bellefonte, PA. It's now an antique store. And I can't believe it, but we got through all the questions.
Well, my focus was women born in the 1800s. I mean,
That makes sense. That makes sense.
right.
So maybe I'll end off with a question of my own, if you don't mind. So how far do you think women architects have come in the 20th and 21st century compared to women born in the 19th century?
I think there's still a ways to go. To be equal footing with the male architects, I think there's still a ways to go. There's been I think, tremendous advancement, yes, but still, I mean, even a woman on a construction site is still considered an inferior person, and that's unfortunate. And so I think they've come a long way as far as the office, but as far as in the field, I think there's still a ways to go.
Yeah, I agree. But I do see a lot more in the offices, and I do see a lot more on sites and in school as well. I think there's, well, in school in particular, I think I see a more rounding of, or about half and half of 50%. And we lost Zaha Hadid, who at the end of her career was the most successful monetarily, from what I understand, architectural firm in the world.
Right.
And her legacy lives on. Her company still exists, and they still do great work. So, all right. Well, any other thing you would like to wrap it up with, Robert?
No, for me, no, I think I've said enough.
Great. Great. Well, thank you everyone again for attending. And if you can make it in person to the National Arts Club next month, we'll see you there. Thank you again, and good night.